OK，你们好。那很幸运的有一些问题啊，希望未来会有越来越多，因为了解为师没有那么容易啊，要用功没有办法。我只给你们一些概念，希望你们会自己未来研究了解，为师对不但对心理学、哲学，也对每天的生活，也对修行，特别如果想入解脱的过程，就为师很有用。让我们怎么修？如果我们了解为师，那它的作用，修行的作用很大。那第一个问题是一个叫 KCL，他说 Venerable, could you explain the relationship between karma and Gotra? I am very glad to have such questions. It means he has contemplated, and only by contemplation we can understand the depths of the Chittamatrata philosophy of Vaishya. So it is according to Vaishya, there are two kinds of Vaishya. One is called Vaishya based on contemplation, Sutta Vaishya, and Vaishya based on Samadhi, Shiva Vaishya. Nowadays, very few people study Vaishya. It is slowly becoming again important since the late Qing dynasty, when some prominent intellectuals started to get more and more interested and made a deep research of Vaishya, like Ouyang Shu, Han Qingqing, and so on. Kam Yo Wei, Liang Qichao, Tang Sedong, they all have studied Vaishya and appreciated its depth. So we actually enter into Vaishya by studying. It is also explained in Sandhi Nirmochana Sutra. Even so, Sandhi Nirmochana Sutra in Vaishya especially emphasize that the real experience is beyond words. But we will never make real experience unless we contemplate the words, contemplate the concept. Because the process of liberation is based on the mental consciousness. Only mental consciousness can investigate the concepts. And finally, our liberation also depends on the mental consciousness. So we have to contemplate the concepts. I have already explained that as opposed to Theravada, which emphasizes that the Vipassana should be based on Paramatta, on the highest reality. The Yogacara emphasizes that the highest reality is Anabhilapya, Pukha unspeakable, Pukha sure. So the emphasis shifts from the highest reality, which is the objects of wisdom, like aggregates and so on. We have mentioned dependent origination. But these objects of wisdom, especially the five aggregates, the Four Noble Truths, for the Yogacara, we have already explained, are in fact also based on concepts. but a real concept. There is a difference between the illusionary concept, like the real being, the real thing, and the real concept, like the five aggregates. And it is through the real concept that we get liberation. Now, also, the Gotra and Karma, they are the real concepts to be studied and understood. Now, Gotra, what is the synonym of Gotra? The synonym of Gotra is, in a Vaishya, is Bija, the seed, or the seeds in our consciousness. And also the synonym of Gotra is Dhatu, Kye. We know that Fa Kye, the Dharma Dhatu, has to do with Dharmata, with the suchness. Now the Gotra is the suchness. The suchness can have different variations, but in essence does not change. Like the Dhatu, in essence also does not change. If you belong to Gotra of Shravakas, you are, so to say, fixed by Dharma, by the Tao, by the path, by the Marga itself, to become an Arahant. Because you have this original Bijas linking you to the Shravaka path, to the liberation of the Arahats. Buddha is also an Arahant. We have explained in Buddhism we have three kinds of Buddhas: the disciple Buddhas, the Buddhas for themselves, and the Supreme Buddha. So you have to have a Gotra, you have to have seeds of the previous practices of wisdom and practice. We will talk about it more, and that is of Vipassana, and the practices of virtue to become a Gotra. Now, if you are a Gotra of the Arahat, you are bound to become an Arahat. If you are a Gotra of the Pratyeka Buddha, of Buddha for himself, you are bound to become the Buddha for himself. If you are a Gotra of a Bodhisattva, you are bound to become, sooner or later, you are bound to become the Supreme Buddha. So the Gotra fixes your path, and according to the path you become. You become, we have already explained, according to your Abhinihara, according to your positive tendencies in mind. The Abhinihara of Adhyashaya, Ila, we have explained, is the opposite of the Sui Mian. In our mind, deep mind, we are usually not conscious of the deep mind. That is why we need meditation to be conscious of the deep mind. We are only conscious of our reactions to the objects, but not conscious of the deep mind. This Gotra is stored in the deep mind, in the Alaya. We normally do not see the Alaya. We also do not see how in Alaya the consciousness becomes like a snail, we have explained, which puts the two tentacles out of his head, become the Tianfen and the Xiangfen, the Darshanapada and the Nimitta. And Alaya, the nature of consciousness is swasamviti, self-awareness. Now, if you have a Gotra, according to the Yogacara, as opposed to other Mahayana schools, there are 5 Gotras. The Gotra of the disciples, the Gotra of the Pratyeka Buddhas, the Gotra of the Bodhisattvas, the non-decided Gotra, Puting Jungshi, and the Ichantika, that means no Gotra. They have no interest in Dharma. They don't believe. As long as you don't believe, now it is very important to understand this is further developed. Of course, the Yogacharyas were criticized by other schools because most of the Mahayana practitioners believe everybody has the nature of the Buddha. But there is a difference between the ideal nature of the Buddha, Li Zhongshin, and Xing Zhongshin, the practice of the nature. And our nature can change also if we are not completely fixed in our Gotra. You will find the famous story of the Shariputra, who, when challenged to give his eye, according to Tajatulun, he gave his eye because he practiced many lives together, not in his last life, but many lives before. He practiced with Sakyamuni Bodhisattva, and he was deeply influenced by his practice of paramis. He also decided he wants to become the Buddha. But when challenged, he gave by Shakya to give his eye, he gave his eye. Then when he spit on it and said he wanted the other eye, then he changed. He said, we beings are so irrational, it is not possible to not get disgusted with the samsara and finish with it. And how can we finish with the samsara? This is very important to understand. According to Yogacara, is by realizing the Swabhava, the Zishin of consciousness. Arahat realizes it. The Pratyeka Buddha realizes it. The Bodhisattva realizes it. That's why they become enlightened. This is the approach of Yogacara. The only thing that exists is the mind. Because without the mind, we cannot even imagine any entity. But because we do not know the self-nature of the mind, which is suchness, therefore we are bound by our karma, vipaka, that means resultant karma, active karma, and by our defilements, like a spider caught in his own net. We have created this net ourselves, no one else. Where we created this net? In our mind. Now, the karma is always in the process of change. Even so, there are the tendencies which are fixed, but there is individual karma, there is the collective karma, they influence each other. And it does not mean if that one has a certain resultant karma. This resultant karma is actually the alaya consciousness, nothing else. This is like the ocean. We have done millions and millions and billions and trillions of karmas which are stored in our consciousness. So this alaya is like the ocean containing everything. Now, which karma comes? Only the Buddha can penetrate. Only the Buddha knows fully the suchness, nature of consciousness. That's why he just reflects. He does not need attention. He does not need investigate the object. He only reflects. Because his Gotra of Bodhisattva has ripened. But for the Arahat, the Gotra of the disciple has also ripened. So according to like Sautrantika, the Nirvana is annihilation. In Theravada, we also often explain the Nirvana as blowing out of a lamp. But also there is a positive aspect. Also in Sarvastivada, it has positive aspect and negative aspect. The positive aspect is no greed, no hate, no ignorance, and it is also non-created. Because it is non-created, it is always there. And it is always there where it is always there. In other traditions, this nirvana is not identified with the suchness of the mind. In the Vijnanavada, it is emphasized nobody wants annihilation. We do not practice meditation, we do not practice virtues to be annihilated. It does not make sense. Now here we are in the Pure Land, so this is especially emphasized in the Pure Land tradition. And Pure Land tradition is also based on the Yogacara. This non-impermanence can be only found in mind. But when you find it, it is neither permanence nor non-permanence. It is beyond words. Nirvana is beyond words. If you understand it as permanence, it is also a concept Yogacara. And Yogacara especially emphasizes there is the concept Yogacara is not real. Just like a concept emptiness is not real. If you have a concept of emptiness, it is not real emptiness. If you have a concept of mind only, it is not the real mind only. Now, it is to be understood that the karma is the nature of the Vasanas. Vasana means the perfumation of the mind. Sichi. And we, as because we have this Sichi, therefore we, on the base of on the base of Vedana, on the base of sensation, feeling, we create karma. Why do we create karma? Because we cling to feelings. The Arahat, the Buddha, does not cling to feelings. So he is beyond the karma. But it does not mean that he is not in karma. He is in the resultant karma. He cannot escape from his karma. But he does not create a new karma based on clinging. This is Arahat. Because he does not create a new karma based on clinging, therefore he has no cause to be reborn. So his Gotra has ripened. When the Gotra, that means when the positive tendencies of the Buddhas, three kinds of Buddhas ripen, they are not bound by karma. Because they have penetrated karma by wisdom. That in a Yogacara tradition means they have abandoned the base of grossness, which are our defilements, which leads to the, and our karma, which leads to the rebirth. But they create the bodhisattvas, if they are highly realized bodhisattvas, they create positive karma with understanding. Therefore, they are not victims of the karma, they start to dominate the karma. That is the aim of the bodhisattva path. By dominating the karma, they change the karma. They change their vasanas. Until they change their bijas, their seeds, until their gotra of the bodhisattva ripens. So the disciple, the ideal of disciple is to detach from samsara, to turn away from the suffering of samsara in order to attain the gotra of the disciple Buddha. The ideal of the bodhisattva is to practice perfect the paramis in order to attain the gotra of the bodhisattva. And the condition of the Pratyeka Buddha, Buddha for himself, is the full understanding of the dependent origination, which leads to the gotra of the Pratyeka Buddha. Full penetration of the dependent origination, which leads away from bondage, turning away from bondage. So both the Arahats and Pratyeka Buddhas turn away from samsara. Their gotra is like that. They are linked, their marga, their path, their Tao is like that. The Tao of the, or marga of the Bodhisattva is different. He does not want to turn away from samsara. He wants to perfect his Bodhisattva Gotra, his Bodhisattva positive tendencies, to eliminate even the subtle tendencies in the mind, the subtle vasanas, subtle sichi of the previous karma habits. The Arahat also has a previous karma habits, but he is not bound by them. The Buddha has no karma habits. So he is really the one who has fully realized the Gotra. And the Gotra, realization of the Gotra in the Yogacara tradition is standing in the nature of the mind. When you stand in the Gotra, you stand in the nature of the mind. All the Arahat, the Pratyeka Buddha, the Bodhisattva Buddha stand in the nature of the mind. Therefore, they are liberated. So this is very important to understand Yogacara and to understand the analysis of mind in Yogacara. So this is a very good question. Please contemplate on it. And now this next question. Can you say something about the assessment? No, I am compelled as a teacher in the university to give you assessment. I will do it. But I will do the same as last time I was here. So you will write an essay on a topic that you like. I will give you several topics. Then from these topics, I can see if you have done some reading or not. And then I will give you a brief oral examination to give you some mark, which I'm supposed to do. But do not worry about assessment, worry about knowledge. This is the most important. I won't let anyone fail, but I will want to encourage all to get some knowledge of Buddhism. You don't study Buddhism, I hope, to get a better job. You study Buddhism to get a better knowledge of how to deal with life and how to deal with suffering. This is the purpose of Buddhism. Now, nowadays, unfortunately, not some people even study Buddhism in order to criticize Buddhism. So with this approach, it's very difficult to understand Buddhism. Dear Venerable, could you elaborate more what is direct object? A very good question, a very important question. I am very glad that some of you start contemplate about what you are learning. It shows that you are giving thoughts to what I am teaching here, and only by giving thoughts to what I am teaching here, you can actually get some benefit of it. So the direct object is that what we experience by the direct perception. Direct perception means without nirvikalpa, that means woof and peer perception. Now, about this woof and peer perception, there is a lot of misunderstanding, because this translation woof and peer and kalpa, nirvikalpa means without kalpa. Kalpa means fabrication. Kalpana, from the Sanskrit klip, which means to fabricate, to make something which is not there. So the direct object is the object that we experience without fabricating, without vikalpa, without fanpia. according to the Buddhist logicians, it is the own characteristic of the object. The common characteristics of the objects we only can deduce. But let's leave the Buddhist logicians now. We are more concerned with the practice. So the direct object, according to the Yogacara, is what, on one hand, the 8 consciousness experiences, and on the other hand, the 5 consciousnesses: eye consciousness, ear consciousness, nose consciousness, tongue consciousness, and bodily consciousness. They experience the direct object without differentiation. That is called Wu Fen Pie. In the Yogacara tradition, they call it Xing, Fo Xing Te Xing, nature. They experience the real nature in the sense that they experience the object without applying the memory to it. The memory is already vikalpa, is already fempie. Without giving the true existing nature, zixin, to the object. When we already give zixin, this is a real xianhua, this is a real taoyuan, this is already vikalpa. And we know that Yogacara, the purpose of Yogacara is to attain Buddhahood. So even the real table, the real outer object is also vikalpa. So when we experience, that's why in this 5th lecture I have introduced the process of the mind, which I will try to explain in the next lecture. What we experience by the eye experiences the object directly, so it is called pratyaksha, xian liang. In Buddhism, especially Mahayana Buddhism, we speak about pramana. Pramana means Jen Liang. Everybody knows Jen Liang, pramana. So in the Buddhist tradition, Mahayana tradition, we have 2 or 3 pramanas, Jen Liang. First is Xian Liang, Prati Aksha. Prati means again, Aksha means eye. So directly what the eye sees, without thinking, without memory, without application of memory, without the differentiation. According to Yogacara, when you experience the color with your eye, then at that time you are not yet aware of the person, you are not yet aware of the table, you are only aware of the color and of the shape. Then the person and the table and so on comes later from the memory, from the previous differentiations which are there. And this memory is based on the sanya. Sanya means perception. Xiang. When there is a sanya, the xiang, so we apply name to it. but this name has no nature. This is the entrance into Yogacara. But our dependent origination, which is a state of everything we experience, is based on the names, is based on the concepts, is based on the words. We cannot help it. When we see something, we already give it a name. It is a table, it is a xianhua, it is a taoyuan. And when we give it a name, when we give it a concept, then we already attach to feeling. Because we give the name, we take the sign of the object, then because we pay attention to the object, we take the sign of the object. When we take the sign of the object, we feel the object. Feel the object means we receive the object. When we receive the object, already there will be an attachment. But if we differentiate the object with the mental consciousness, because the mental consciousness is based on manas. Very important to understand. And manas is a deep consciousness. Mental consciousness, usually we react to what we see. So we are not aware of the spontaneous attachment or spontaneous disliking. The spontaneous attachment already comes from manas, and it is very subtle. That's why even in a dream, this woman, eating is already there. So in the dream, when we see a beautiful object, we are attached. When we see a frightful object, why? Because these, our mental consciousness, which is freed in the dream from the outer objects, still is based in the manas. And manas has alaya as object, and alaya also has manas object. They are interrelated. So when we experience with the eye consciousness or with the alaya, we experience the direct object. We experience the nature, so to say, the nature of the mind. Nature of the mind is non-dualistic. Dualism comes later, through the memory of the past experiences, through the feelings accumulated by perceptions. Very important to understand. And due to these feelings and previous perceptions, we then impose the self-nature on the phenomena. We learn Yogacara in order to understand that this is wrong. So the direct object is experienced momentarily. And then the mental consciousness comes with a clear perception, with a clear feeling. And according to that, then we act and we think. Then that object which we have experienced directly through the eye or through the body is already not there. It has disappeared already. It is then investigated, and one decides about it with the help of the mental consciousness. And then due to the mental consciousness, there appear the pure and impure, and due to pure and impure, there appears the tanglu. So that's why when we experience a color, we already experience some liking, disliking, because we experience the color of the beautiful woman, which is, or beautiful man, or whatever, beautiful clothes or beautiful car, which is already not there. So all Buddhist traditions, no matter whether Theravada, Sarvastivada, Yogacara, our defilements are based on concepts. Not on the direct seeing. So I think I have already mentioned in Yogacara, we have to distinguish 3 types of objects. I don't remember if I have already mentioned it. There are 3 types of objects. The nature object, Xing, Yuan. Xing Yuan is what we experience by alaya and what we experience by the eyes and the 5 consciousnesses. And that experience comes directly, without intermediary of the manas, through the bijas in the alaya. It is the xiangfen, the nimitta bhaga of the alaya, directly. No intermediary. Now, what we experience by manas, be it the, as Xianzang believe, the Tianfen, Darshana Bhaga of the alaya, or be it the seats in the alaya, or whatever. There is big discussion on that. But anyway, it is alaya. So we experience the real substance. That's why it's called the Tai Zhi. Wu Zhi, De Zhi. It is difficult to translate. We can translate it as for lack of better translation. Everybody knows what is Zhi. Shall I write it? Give me some pen. Maybe one day we can make a heipan or paipan, or can you share? Material, yes. Everybody can see?
Okay.
So Tai Zhi, material, yes, but we can translate it. Material is not so clear. The original stuff, maybe stuff is better. The original stuff is, of course, the mind. So when the mind sees the mind, it is a Tai Zhi. When the manas sees the alaya, it is Tai Zhi Yuan. When the 6 consciousness sees the mental factors which arise in it, it is also Tai Zhi. But when we see materiality, which does not exist independent of the mind, which is actually the creation of the mind. Then we see Tai Yin, Yin Xiang Te Yin. Everybody knows Yin Xiang Te Yin, 不用学. So 3 kinds of objects. Now, in the Yogacara scriptures, seeing the Taija is like the lamp illumining the lamp. They are of the same stuff. Now, seeing the Tai Yin is like the lamp illumining the wall. They are of a different stuff. Different stuff, but only in our imagination. Because the mind is not dual. But of course, they have resistance. The materiality has a resistance. But this resistance is also created by the mind, by dependent origination. It does not mean it does not exist. It exists independent origination. It exists in the relative reality, not in the real reality. In the real reality, only mind exists. In the dependent reality, of course, the materiality, the resistance exists, and the time exists, and the space exists. So this is a lot of confusion about that. So we have to study these 3 types of objects to understand. So these 3 types of objects are taught in Alaya, and the first thing to be done in Vaishnava is to break the power of the yin xiang on us, to see through the yin xiang. That is meditation. Then you can break the power of the parikalpita, of the pianchi. This is the process of meditation. So we start our lecture by analyzing the attention, because the mental process starts with attention. According to Yogacara, and according to Buddhism in general, it comes in the Chengwei Shalun, there are 5 margas, 5 Tao. First, you have to have Ziliang Tao. Then you can have Jiaxin Tao. Then it comes in Chengwei Shalun. After Jiaxin Tao, then you can have Jian Tao. When you have Jian Tao, you can have Shu Tao. When you have Shu Tao, you can become Buddha. Jiu Jin Tao. Now, we are to explain the Ziliang Tao. Ziliang Tao depends on our understanding of the Zhu Li Zui. In order to attain the Gotra, according to Yogacara, you have to have 4 conditions. The first actually is Zui. In order to attain, in order to attain the not Gotra, but the Ziliang Tao. In order to attain Ziliang Tao, the Sambhara Marga, you need a Gotra, you need a Zoi, you need a Kalyana Mitra, you need Shangzhishi. and the Kalyan Mitra Shangzhi, and you need punya, fu bao. If you don't have these four, you don't have Ziliang Tao. So you have Ziliang Tao when you have Gotra. Then it is fixed that you succeed in your meditation. If you don't have Gotra, it is not fixed that you succeed in your meditation. But the Gotra is not enough. You have to have Shangzhi to explain to you Vipassana. You can succeed in Shamatha, even learning by yourself, but you can only succeed, Yogacara explains in Vipassana, if you have a Shangzhi to explain what to see and how to see. So these four must be there, and you must practice the manasikara, the joy, attention. Attention means make the object in the mind according to the reality. Without tientao, without vipalasa, without perversion. And what is the tientao? To see the permanence in that which is impermanent, to see the supreme happiness in that which is impermanent, to see, especially to see the self in which has no self, and to see something that belongs to me, that comes before, where nothing actually belongs to me. In a Theravada, to see the pure in the impure. This is slightly different, but the same meaning. To see pure in the impure is the truth of suffering. Now, in the Yogacara tradition, actually to practice Yogacara, you have to understand that the 8 vikalpas, Pajong Fempie, because we don't see clearly this Pajong Fempie, so we, as Chengwei Shirun explained, we see the self-existent nature in persons and in things. When we have penetrated the 8 kinds of vikalpas, we can realize the suchness. Now the first 3 vikalpas are not a vikalpa, not an obstacle for the disciples and for the Pratyeka Buddhas, but they are obstacle for a bodhisattva. So if you want to practice the bodhisattva path, you have to contemplate the own nature in things as a vikalpa, the differentiation based on own nature in things as a vikalpa, and the real existence of that which is compounded also is a vikalpa. So it is the obstacle in the realization of the selflessness of the phenomena, but not obstacle in realizing the selflessness in persons. Then the next vikalpas are the base for our ignorance. It is the vikalpa of a true person and of what belongs to the true person. Wo, wo, suo. On the base of these vikalpas, then we have the ignorance. And the next three vikalpas, manapa, amanapa, manapa, namanapa, means the pleasant, unpleasant, and neither pleasant nor unpleasant. Because of this differentiation, that means, does not mean Arahat does not experience pleasant and unpleasant, but he does not cling. Because we cling to this differentiation, we create karma. And we create, because we create karma, we create the causes of our future rebirth. So when you penetrate these 8 vikalpas, then you can get the genuine realization, bodhisattva realization. When you penetrate the 5 vikalpas without the first 3 ones, you can get the realization of the Arahat. And now we are in the path to realize the realization of the Arahat. Later, when we have time, we will talk more about the realization of the bodhisattva. But it is very important to understand from the point of view of Yogacara, the realization of the Arahat is also the realization of the suchness of the mind. That's why we have to understand, as long as we are not realized, we have not realized suchness or nirvana, we are caught in our yin-xiang, pratibimba. So in order to realize anything, the Shravaka path, Bodhisattva path, we have to break the power of the yin-xiang. The power, that is the first step. But first you have to have the ziliang. Then you can do the correct yashin. And when you have the correct yashin, you get the fa ren, the tolerance or acceptance of the Dharma, which is equal. We are not equal because we are based on our Sichi and on our Jungs, on our Bijas. So we have to understand the deep mind. We have to contemplate the mind. We have to see very clearly how subtle these tendencies, even in a dream, we still have the manas, we still have these tendencies, sleeping tendencies to defilement. They are very, very deep in us. Now the mental consciousness is crucial for meditation. Why? Because mental consciousness can distinguish all 3 objects. The 5 consciousnesses in alaya only distinguishes the Shin object. The manas only distinguishes the Taiji object, nothing else. And but the mental consciousness can distinguish 3 kinds of objects. So it is crucial for meditation. It can distinguish the Sing object. It can distinguish the Taiji object. It can distinguish the Tai Yin object. So 6 consciousness deludes us, but the 6 consciousness also liberates us. So we have explained before that our process of liberation from the Yogacara point of view is completely based on our prapancha, penetrating the prapancha, silun, our process of differentiation. This is wisdom. when we penetrate the Shilun, we can get liberated. So I have explained the things a little bit more in detail so that you start getting understanding of you are learning. So the direct answer would be very simple, but I have made it more in detail so that you can start seeing the depth of the Yogacara analysis. How deep this alaya is our ocean. We have no other ocean than the ocean of alaya. There is a sutra called the Ocean Sutra in the Ayatana Samyutta, Chu Zar Za Ahanji, Chu Za. The Buddha says, I is the ocean. In the eye, appear the waves of the colors. One who can tolerate these waves of the colors can cross the great ocean of the eye. Ear is the ocean. In the ear, the sounds are the waves. One who can tolerate the waves in the shape of the sounds in the ocean of the ear, he can cross the great ocean of the ear. Similarly, the mind is the ocean. One who can tolerate in the mind the waves of the dharmas, of the phenomena, mental phenomena which appear in the mind, he can cross the great ocean of the mind. Now, you study Yogacara, there is no 6 oceans, there is only one ocean. And that is the ocean of the alaya. And this is all we experience, whether we like it or not. We are all in that ocean. But because we have the deep habit of seeing the self-nature in persons and things, therefore, we cannot tolerate the waves in this ocean. Very wonderful. What means tolerate? Please tell me. Samadhi. Practice of Buddhism is samadhi. When you have realization, sotapanna, the stream entered T equal, he has samadhi. The T equal, deeper samadhi. T sanquo, deeper samadhi. T sequo cannot leave his samadhi. That's why he can tolerate the waves in the ocean, not create another karma. Now, when you become a Bhumi Bodhisattva T Bosa, you can also tolerate the waves in the ocean. But you are still deeply subjected to your tendencies. When you have attained the 8th path, you are beyond these tendencies. 8th Bodhisattva Bhumi, Achala, Putung, you are beyond these tendencies. You cannot, your mind does not move, that's for Putung. Then you are like an Arahat. But still not complete. Still continue to learn, because these subtle tendencies may still arise. So you need the 9th and 10th bhumi to become completely in the state of beyond tendencies. Then the Gotra of Bodhisattva can ripen. Because the tendencies are there, we do not master the Dharma. Only the Buddha has mastered the Dharma. To master the Dharma from the Yogacara point of view is to realize the ways. Now, last question, Venerable, regarding to the Puchingquan. We have not yet spoken of the Puchingquan. I wish you ask questions about the things we have discussed, and that you, because there are so many things to learn in Buddhism, we have no way. And what I am teaching is not easy to understand, so I hope you can ask questions concerning that. Regarding Puchingquan, is it suitable to all practitioners? What kind of people can and will practice Puchingquan? This is very easy, and it is explained in Yogacara, it is explained in Theravada also, it is explained in Jishulun. Those whose conduct is dominated by desire, by greed, by attachment, they should practice Puchingquan. Otherwise, if they don't pay attention to the non-beautiful object, their attachment to the beautiful will lead to more and more defilements. But attachment to the beautiful is not bad, of course, for the artist, but it will not, if you want to reduce attachment, you will have to, because attachment comes from contemplating the desirable. You can have beautiful object, but not have attachment. But when you contemplate the desirable object and have attachment, want to grasp it, want to possess it, how will you get rid of this tendency? By contemplating the object you don't want to possess. The good artist also does not want necessarily to possess the beauty. He can be detached from the beauty. But the attachment to the beautiful object which brings suffering, that can be only reduced by contemplating the object you don't want to possess. Nobody wants to possess. We all want to possess as long as we are not the arahats. We still have some tendencies to possess some beautiful object we like, be it a female or a car or a house or whatever, or man. But suppose we attach too much to a female, always thinking and suffering because we can't possess. When we possess only for a short time. We cannot possess for a long time. So, what to do? When you see a beautiful female form, you pay attention to the hair, but when you see the hair without the other things, then the hair is not desirable at all. Similarly, any part of the body that we pay attention to as being beautiful, being desirable, we want to possess, a female form or male form. When we contemplate it individually, skin, flesh, sinew, only disgust will come. Similarly, nobody wants to possess nobody wants to possess flesh. Nobody wants to possess the human flesh, the human skin, the human brain, the human sinews, the human excrements, the human urine. So nobody wants to possess the corpses in different stage of decay, with the worms which are inflated, which change colors with pus and so on. Nobody wants to possess. So by contemplating such objects, you get disgusted. Normally you don't get disgusted with your desire. You get disgusted with your desire. So you find peace. So those who are disturbed by their desires, for those whose desires create suffering, the only efficient cure for them, unless they have not some deeper realization, is the Puchinkwa. For example, some people would be very scared of insects faint in blood. Are these people not suitable for such practice? They are suitable. Of course they are. Everybody is suitable. But they have to develop concentration first. When they have concentration, everything is different. When they don't have concentration, then they are completely victims of their sensations. When you have concentration, correct concentration, which is detached concentration. In Buddhism, we distinguish two types of concentration based on two types of mindfulness. The right mindfulness and wrong mindfulness. Right mindfulness, detachment. And seeing, being concentrated and being aware of everything what is going on. That is mindfulness. So you can be concentrated on one object only, but you can be mindful of all objects around. That is correct mindfulness. Now a cat, if it wants to catch a mouse, that is a wrong mindfulness. Very mindful, the cat, wonderful, tiger, wonderful mindfulness, but in order to swallow something. So this is wrong mindfulness. So the right mindfulness leads to right samadhi. Right samadhi is always with sha, sing sha. Wrong samadhi has no sing sha. So like a warrior, he can be very concentrated, not kill many people, because he has no sing sha. And sing sha can only come when we have concentration. And concentration will only come when we have correct mindfulness. Why would only some of the people be scared of those insect, blood, horrible things? In the past, we have all explained the past experience. The bijas or the zhongzi or the siqi. Is it related to his non-pure alaya. Of course, everything that we experience as a suffering is related to our non-pure alaya. When the alaya becomes purified, we become the Buddhas. How can the practitioner tackle the fear object? By practicing concentration, very simple, based on right mindfulness. So the first practice is the right mindfulness. No matter what you practice, without mindfulness, you will not get anywhere. So that much. Ohio. Something. Yeah, highlight. Good evening, Venerable. Could you elaborate what the direct objects are? How many of them? That is, I have explained. So what is the problem? Direct objects is the colors that the eye sees, the sounds that the ear sees. Then you have different analysis of the colors, but we don't go into that. That is not important. You can study Jishurun, then you will find all these different. Venerable, you have mentioned mental consciousness, awareness and mindfulness in different occasions. Are they different? Of course, they're different. The awareness and mindfulness, they are shinsuo. They are mental factors. But the mental consciousness, it has mental factors, but it is different from mental factors. So according to Yogacara, you can study later the consciousness. Job of consciousness is liao pie, differentiate. But differentiate in gross. The job of the mental factors is to differentiate in detail. And is alaya what we call subconscious in Western psychology? Actually not. It is not exactly the same. It cannot be the same because strictly speaking, there is no subconscious. All is conscious, and that is to be realized. The sutra says all is conscious, the object of consciousness does not exist. So subconscious is actually conscious. So we can speak in about subconscious in the conventional way. There is no harm about it. But in the highest reality, there is no subconscious. Everything is conscious. Dear Venerable, in the last lecture note, it stated that the true suchness nature of the mind can only be realized in the state of samadhi. Since we develop wisdom through vipassana, does it mean that we can practice vipassana while one is immersed in samadhi, or the samadhi is in itself a form of insight? So there is little bit confusion. We can clarify it. This is very important. Now, Vipassana is also Samadhi. The real Vipassana is Samadhi. So in Theravada, we distinguish 10 kinds of Samadhi. In Yogacara, in Mahayana tradition, you will find it's slightly different. What 10 kinds of Samadhi? We have the proximate Samadhi, Chinshinting. We have the first dhyana, second dhyana, third dhyana, fourth dhyana in the sutye, in the subtle forms. We have first dhyana, second dhyana, third dhyana, fourth dhyana in the wusutye, non-formless. This is the traditional training in dhyana. Now we have also the Vipassana Samadhi, which sees the Kshana Kshana Shenmye. That is, you cannot see Kshana Kshana Shenmye unless your mind has a Samadhi. And that is a Vipassana Samadhi. Now, the real Samadhi, the highest Samadhi, is a supermundane Samadhi. These are the worldly Samadhis with worldly objects. Now the supermundane Samadhi has an object you cannot grasp. You cannot take the sign of that object. So object is emptiness. You cannot grasp emptiness. Yeah, like you cannot grasp the space. And it is the nature of the mind. You cannot find the characteristic to grasp in the emptiness. If you grasp the characteristic, it is not object beyond the world, beyond the worldly reality, because the worldly reality is all based on the sign of the object, which we grasp, which we feel. And due to these feelings of the signs of the object, then we give rise either to the wholesome thought process or non-wholesome thought process. So, if the aim of Buddhism is to get liberation from the suffering, and that is only possible when you cut the defilements. The defilements, according to Buddhism, can only be cut with an object which you cannot grasp. And that is why on that object you can practice a middle way. This is very important to understand. The middle way will ripen on that object. No matter whether you study the Shravaka path or the Bodhisattva path, it will ripen on the object you cannot grasp. It will ripen in the Nirvikalpa Jnana, the Wufen Pie Zhihui. The non-created is not object of the Fenpie, is the object of Wufen Pie Zhihui. Whatever we differentiate is only a worldly object. Very important to understand. So, besides these, also you have the what is called Jinfen Sanmei. So, why you can practice Vipassana in the dhyana? Because you are not, so to speak, in the dhyana, you are in the Jinfen dhyana. In the Jinfen dhyana, you can observe the impermanence. In the dhyana itself, you don't see the impermanence. Very important to understand. So according to Theravada, you go out of dhyana to practice vipassana. According to the northern tradition, you practice vipassana in the dhyana, but they describe the same experience of the Jinfen. When you study Yogacara, the ultimate shamatha is when the mind does not move. And the ultimate vipassana is when the mind moves with the wisdom which comes after enlightenment. So in order to understand the real nature of the world, we have to get enlightened. Then we can use wisdom after enlightenment. Gotra. Another question comes. Now we are hold. I hope we will come to the lecture also. Dear Venerable, talking about our dream, if there is no subconsciousness in Yogacara, so what can we talk about? What can we talk about the consciousness in the dream? In the dream, you still have a consciousness. Otherwise, you are not conscious of anything. So, how can you be conscious of anything if you don't have consciousness? So the consciousness is only one. But its types are many, many. And what could be the object of that dream consciousness? The object of the dream consciousness is nothing but your memory and your previous sanya, perceptions, xiang, which is connected with memory, and your previous attachment to the xiang. So that's why you are still following the Vedana. You are still following the emotions, and strong emotions can appear in the dream. But this is a kind of a proof of the mind only. What we experiencing in the awakened consciousness, according to Yogacara, is in nature not really different from what we experience in the dream. That's why you cannot make a clear distinction between subconscious and conscious. This is very important to understand. What you experience as with a consciousness is not what the other beings experience with consciousness, because we make even in the worldly life, we make a mind, we make objects in the mind in a different way. Similarly, in the dream, same process. And we make the objects different in accordance with the seeds in our alaya. So there is nothing but consciousness, but the objects of consciousness is not real. This is what is to be realized. So how does alaya operate In the same way like it operates when we are awake, it operates on the base of our seeds. Now, what is the nature of the alaya? It appropriates the sthana, the chu, which is the world. We see the world in accordance with our alaya, and it appropriates in accordance with our zhisho. Zhisho means upadana. What we appropriate the senses, and we appropriate the seeds of our previous experiences, the bijas. This is alaya. So it is the king of the vipaka, Ishu Wang. That's why it can appropriate. It is the perfumed, and the active consciousnesses are the perfumers. Very important to understand. So we have 7 active consciousnesses which are perfumers, and we have the alaya which is being perfumed. And this is our causality. So when we are sleeping mode, we are still in appropriation of our seeds, which create the attitude to our objects. And we are still in appropriation of our senses, which is all we have in order to be aware of anything, and which is also the place of our appropriation, the world that we experience. And we experience the world in a different way because we have different karma. So we have the different sthana, we have a different place, which is alaya. Now, you will have hard time to convince the fish that the water is what we see. You will have a very hard time to convince the gods that the water is what we see. Similarly, you will have a very hard time to convince God that what we find attractive is attractive. What we find attractive is disgusting for the gods. What we find attractive is disgusting for gods, but it may be supreme for the animals. Because the animals, they have a much less capability to enjoy than we have. And we have much less capability to enjoy than the gods. All based on our word, on our alaya. But the alaya is not the self. It is only the resultant consciousness. But without understanding this resultant consciousness, you cannot attain Buddhahood. This is Yogacara. Because it's a resultant consciousness is a whole. And in this whole, we have accumulated our positive tendencies, our negative tendencies. But our positive tendencies, they don't lead to bondage. Our negative tendencies lead to bondage. And we have all our karma is there also. So can we define the object of dream, the non-direct object? Indeed, it is the object of mental consciousness. The eye have no function in the dream. The ears have no function in the dream. But you can still see in the dream by mental consciousness. Okay. 所有人 there is something. When a patient is in surgery, he is injected chloroform and noting maybe nothing during the surgical section. Do he has a conscious at the time? Yes, but not the alaya consciousness is there. Otherwise, he would not get up. But his mental consciousness is not deep. The alaya consciousness in manas is very deep. Mental consciousness is not deep. And we are all generally in daily life working on the base of mental consciousness. We are not even aware of the deep consciousness, manas and the alaya. But we cannot call them subconsciousness because they are not divided. They are only one consciousness. 还有中文，没有看过。没有。Okay, so let's make a. 还有。那我们 we will continue. Always do the, maybe if there are many questions, we devote the first half to the questions, and the second half we have to read at least briefly the Jiangyi. Otherwise, we will not get further, and we will always stay with the same Jiangyi. So please have patience. We will come to your questions, but in due time, but not necessarily in one day. If necessary, we will then choose some other time for the questions. So now 15 minutes break, and we will continue and go to the text, and I hope you will give some thoughts to it because it's starting to be a little deep. ，OK， 大家在吗？
会不会太高啊？
不会。
你喜欢这样还是刚才？
这样比较好。
好。
这里有什么？咚咚咚，为什么咚咚咚？啵啵啵，咚咚咚。
在哪里咚？
对，你看。
正在连接哦，它在 connect， 可能是这个，还没有加入，
看得比较清楚。
OK， 那我们继续啊。So let us continue, and I will read and give some explanation if necessary. And please prepare some questions, because now we are a little bit going to the depths. Even so, the Shravaka Bhumi describes the practice of shamatha and vipassana from the perspective of disciples. It uses the logic of the practice based on the mind-only philosophy, which it considers to be universal, common to all Buddhist practices. That we have explained before. No need to elaborate. So it follows the same lines of progress explained in the Bodhisattva practice. We have explained in the previous lecture some. There are many aspects of this progress, but taking the Abhidharma Samuccaya practice based on resolution, penetrate, which means penetrate the fact that the shamatha nimitta, in order to enter shamatha, you need the shamatha nimitta, shamatha image, is mind only. It becomes most clear when you practice shamatha. Suppose you practice meditation on the breath. The real breath is the wind element which you experience with the body. It is vibration. And vibration is not long, it's not short. That long and short is already experienced by the mental consciousness. And that is the anapana nimitta, which, if you have concentration, becomes the shamatha nimitta. Practice based on predominant tendencies realize on an object and chosen object. That object is but a result of subject. So according to your need, you use the chosen object. This is very important. We will talk about it more later. This is explained in regard to also the combination of shamatha and vipassana. Practice based on the characteristics or signs of object. That is, one-pointed mind in samadhi knows the shamatha and vipassana reflected image as that which is similar to that. Similar to that means similar to suchness. We have talked about it before in for example, in the Maha-Rahulovada Sutta, I have explained before, the suchness is described as similar to that. The earth is similar to that because it accepts everything that you put on it. The water is similar to that because it flushes everything that comes into it, and so on. So it is this vipassana, shamatha and vipassana image is not suchness, but it is similar to that. Because you will find clearly it is all production of the mind. Practice of transcending the signs. After this understanding, contemplate suchness. When you have penetrated the images, you can contemplate the suchness. In the Yogacara tradition, we have the 7 kinds of suchness to be contemplated on. The suchness of Liu Zhuan. In fact, the samsara as we see it is not real. The suchness of Xiang, that which we see as a self, has no self at all in terms of persons and in terms of, and the suchness of the mind only. Then the suchness of the Four Noble Truths, which is the suchness of the only suchness, the suchness which establishes us in reality of impermanence, which is suffering, the suchness of xie, the suchness of wrong conduct, which is attachment, greed, desire, possession. The suchness of the end of suffering, and the suchness of the right conduct, which is the middle path. From the point of view of the Yogacara, which studies also reality with the help of the suchness, which is the ultimate reality, actually only the suchness we will learn later in the Bodhisattva path, all is a suchness of the truth of extinction. Then finally, effortless practice. When you become a Buddha, no matter whether disciple Buddha or the Pratyeka Buddha or the highest Buddha, you practice effortlessly. So you don't need to struggle to remove defilements. The difference in understanding of the signs of objects in different vehicles. They are only paratantra for disciples. They are paratantra, the dependent origination is real. For the disciples, the sign of the objects are real because they are the signs belonging to the 5 aggregates, to the 12 spheres of perception, 18 elements. They are real. They are the real objects of wisdom, real objects of dependent origination. The persons and things, they are conventional. And in order to understand the dependent origination, you have to first understand the real objects we have already spoken about. And we will then speak about it more when we talk about the other 2 objects. Now we are still in the analysis of the practice of Shravakas before the realization, where the only objects are the images, yin xiang. When there is realization, you can go to the 3rd object, which is called shi bian ji. That means the limit of that which has a real base. Limit of that which has a real base. The person has no real base, but the suchness and the 5 aggregates and so on, they have the real base. The disciples, but only parikalpita, it is still a concept which, if you apply self-nature to it, then it is parikalpita. And we apply self-nature to our dependent origination. as long as Vastu Paryanta is not experienced. Vastu Paryanta is experience. Vastu Paryanta has two aspects. We will talk about it later. Jin Suoyo Shin and Ru Suoyo Shin. Yavat Bhavikata, Yatha Bhavikata. When you have realization of suchness, of nirvana, then you don't see a real person, but you see the limit of everything we can experience in the world as the 5 aggregates, 12 spheres, 18 elements, dependent origination. That is Yavat Bhavikata, Jin Suoyoshi. And all this is Ru Suoyoshi. That means it is experienced in terms of 4 noble truths. So when you have this experience, then you have the experience of the middle path, which reveals the ultimate object. This middle path is a direct experience, not a construction. As long as we don't have direct experience of the object which is not created, nirvana cannot be created. And in Theravada tradition, the only non-created object, only Wu-Wei, is nirvana. In the northern tradition, we have different, like space and so on. So ultimately, the signs of objects and their signlessness is neither same nor different. So finally, this is to lead you to the ultimate realization, so that you leave the grossness and attain the purity. So the ultimate object is the purity of the 5 aggregates. Very important to understand. In order to attain the purity of the 5 aggregates, you have to leave the grossness. And 5 aggregates is a world we experience. There is no other world than that. And that is stored in our alaya. That's why we experience it in a different way, according to whether we are humans or whether we are gods or whether we are animals or whether we are beings in the hell. We experience it different. This is common karma, but also we experience it different in terms of individual. We all are attracted by different things. We all have aversion to different things. This is our individual. So the ultimate realization is one truth. There are no 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 truths, only one truth. And that truth is the suchness. And the suchness can only be found in consciousness. And the suchness has the worldly side, which are the 5 aggregates, and it has the ultimate side, which is the suchness in the highest sense. It is to be kept in mind that the approach of Yogacara is based on the skillful means of no attainment, as taught in the transcendental wisdom sutras and as interpreted in the Sandhi Nirmochana Sutra. We have already explained the Yogacara beliefs that the Vaishya is a third turning of the wheel, which is based on the Sandhi Nirmochana Sutra, Tieshan Mijing. So due to non-attainment, the equality between the mundane and supramundane is to be directly realized in all Buddhist practices. This is very important. And it is to be directly realized eventually completely by the bodhisattvas, but partially by the disciples through the penetration of the images. So ultimately the worldly truth and the supramundane truth must be equal. This is the realization we have to work for. And that can only, it can only happen in the state of perfect Buddhahood. So the practice of the Shravakas according to Yogacara is based on correct differentiation, and the practice of the Bodhisattvas on non-differentiation. Non-differentiation does not mean that we don't differentiate, but that we have no attachment to differentiation whatsoever. This is very often confusion, because Fanpia, we think that it is something we must necessarily have some grasping, but it is not. The Yogacara, among others, explain two types of mind only. The mind only by force of contemplation, and the mind only by force of direct seeing in the state of Samadhi. This is very important. I have mentioned it before, because the true Yogacara, and that is why it's called Yogacara, is to be realized only in Samadhi. But we necessarily need to contemplate, and contemplate a lot. Now, Chinese Buddhism became, after Tang Dynasty, very simple because of the conditions for studying and for contemplation were simply not there. So the scriptures of Xuanzang that Xuanzang brought from India ceased to be object of study, and simple techniques like Zen or like Pure Land were taught. For Yogacara, you need to contemplate a lot. And nowadays, modern time, we have no time. So many misunderstanding about Yogacara, even among prominent scholars. Like some Western scholars, even very, very enlightened scholars, saying that Yogacara is just speculation about alaya. But it is a speculation based on, it is based on Samadhi. Otherwise, it is not a real Yogacara. So you have to contemplate in Samadhi to be Yogacara. That is the depth of the Yogacara interpretation of the dependent origination. All is alaya. That is not easy to understand. If all is alaya, you may think this is nonsense, then how this mountain is the consciousness. But no, it's not like that. It's not that simple to understand. That mountain really exists, but in relative truth. According to Yogacara, all Buddhist yoga, all Buddhist yogis, no matter what vehicles they practice, attain realization based on alaya. This is very important. So, in order to study this, first we have to study to understand the attention. Attention means making in the mind. When we make an object in the mind, whether we are aware of it or not aware of it, we are, so to say, already moving the mind. And we are moving the mind because we have an impulse from it. Where does the impulse come to it? From the alaya. But we are not conscious of it. So whether we know it or not know it, we are already living in the world of alaya. When we make an object in our mind and we start differentiating, we are already experiencing the alaya indirectly. Also, I have chosen here, there is a question, why one has to realize mind only? You may ask yourself, in order to get liberated. It does not make sense. The disciples don't know the mind only, right? But actually, according to Yogacara, they know, but they don't use this concept. So penetrating the supramundane shamatha and vipassana practice based on common characteristics of the phenomena. This comes from the Sandhi Nirmochana Sutra, Kieshan Meeting. That is all that has one's own characteristic dwells in mind. And the mind is the base for all characteristics. So that's why after explaining attention, I explain the process of the mind. This is very important to understand. The attention is a beginning of the process in the mind. The process, mental process, starts with attention. But this is in our case. In the case of Buddha, he does not need attention. He just reflects the object. But we necessarily have to understand the object through attention, through investigation. So the Buddha, in order to know this is Ananda, he has to pay a special attention. That is not a real attention, because it has real attention, has receiving the object. But the Buddha does not receive the object. He does not receive it. Receiving object means receiving in terms of liking, disliking, and neither liking nor. And that kind of receiving does not exist with an enlightened person. This is very important to understand. So that's why tomorrow we will start the 4 illimitables. We are bound by our feelings and we are liberated by feelings. And the feelings are based on what? On the touch. There is touch and there is feeling. When there is touch, there already is blowing the alaya wind from the bijas. So our mind starts moving, shaking. Not in the case of Buddha. So all that we know, all that we can realize, this is the first principle to be contemplated in Buddhist practice for understanding any Buddhism, even the children Buddhism. All that we know, all that we realize through the touch. And our touch is subjective because it automatically produces the feeling with attachment. But not in the case of Buddha, not in the case of an Arahant. So we know we are not Buddhas because our touch is not experienced with the Xingsha, the Buddha, no matter whether disciple Buddha, the Supreme Buddha, when he experiences touch, his mind does not shake. So he is not subjected to the clinging to pleasant touch, to aversion to unpleasant touch, and to delusion with neither pleasant nor unpleasant touch. And this all happens in the mind, nowhere else. And it is a suchness of the mind. The samsara is also the suchness of the mind. But we don't see it. So, according to Yogacara, there is only one Zushin, and that is a mind. No object and no person has a Zushin. The following principles in learning to apply attention to the object to learn samadhi, and without samadhi you cannot really study Yogacara. That means real study of Yogacara is based on the direct experience through samadhi. This direct experience through samadhi is, in the tradition of yoga, is the xianliang, is the direct perception. The following principles in learning to apply attention to the object, to learn samadhi and to connect it with vipassana practice are same for all Buddhist practices. So no matter whether you study the Shravaka practice, whether the disciple practice, the Bodhisattva practice, it applies to all practices. You have to master the attention. This is the key to wisdom. Because we have not mastered the attention, we are in samsara. But we have to see it very clearly. So, by practicing shamatha, you apply attention which removes these 5 shortcomings, or 6 shortcomings sometimes. And they are called kosha, dosha. And they are abandoned gradually. Very important to understand. So the first shortcoming to be abandoned is laziness. Laziness is kausidyam shietai. But shietai actually does not only mean laziness, it means, so to say, inability to practice attention, to practice wise attention. Negligence, to practice mindfulness. Laziness means negligence in the practice of mindfulness. So first we learn not to be negligent in the meditation practice, and we have to learn not to be negligent in the daily life. Then our quality of life will change radically. And what are these 5 or 6 thoughts are abandoned by 8 formations. They are called Pa Tuan Shin. Prahana samskara in Sanskrit. Prahana means abandon. Samskara means formation. The 8 formations which abandon these 5 or 6 thoughts. So you need to cultivate these formations gradually to get rid of the grossness in our mind, which is responsible for our poor quality of life. Because our mind is gross, we don't experience the subtle. And because we don't experience the subtle, we don't experience the manas, we don't experience the alaya. And so we are completely obsessed by our differentiations, which belong to our completely subjective mind. So laziness, there are 4 mental factors that abandon laziness called prahana samskaras, Pa Tuan Shin. They are linked with the 4 kinds of yoga. In Shravaka Bhumi, Shenwenti, you will find the 4 kinds of yoga. Everybody has to practice who wants to attain any type of liberation from suffering. And this is basically same in Buddhism as in the Patanjali Yoga Sutras, in the yoga, Hindu yoga. So the first is faith. And the faith in us, when we have faith, it manifests as 2 resolutions. Resolutions to have what means faith. Faith actually means the Chitta Prasada. It means the clarity of mind. The Vasubandhu defines faith as a religious love, prema. That brings the clarity into the mind. Because we don't have this religious love, we don't have the love for that which is beyond us, beyond our limitations, so we don't have the clarity in mind. So we are obsessed with our differentiation. In Theravada tradition, the faith is defined as okapana, which means avakalpana, to settle down on the object of the faith. And what are the objects of the faith? There are 8 objects, according to Abhidharma. Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. Buddha is the one who teaches the Dharma. Dharma is that which leads to end of suffering. Sangha is those who apply this Dharma, who practice the path leading to the end of suffering. The past 5 aggregates, the present 5 aggregates, and the future 5 aggregates, that means cause and effect. Then dependent origination, and then the teachings of the Tripitaka. So that is faith. We have to have love for that which is beyond us, to clarify our mind. So we shun, sin shun. And we have the will, resolution to practice purity. So we have faith. And what is the base for faith? Understanding suffering. If we understand suffering, we can have faith. If we don't understand suffering, we will have no faith. So we will not believe in anything beyond our small differentiating mind. Then when we have faith, we will have desire. Desire means desire to act. Desire to act means, in this case, desire to witness directly, to inquire into the Dharma, to gather equipment for the Dharma, for the genuine practice of Dharma, for penetration of the Dharma, and to follow yoga. Yoga means shamatha vipassana. And the equipment for shamatha and vipassana is mindfulness and so on. The effort, right effort. Then when we have such a desire, we then have vyayama. Vyayama is, we can practice as chinchin, but it is not just chinchin, it is not just effort. Vyayama means actually effort in the correct practice. And correct practice is to hear the Dharma, to contemplate it, and to practice it, and to remove obstacles in the path. Then, if we practice these previous 3, then we will attain the Ching-an, pliancy of body and mind. So we are open to yoga. If we don't have pliancy, we are not open to yoga. So we rely completely on our very subjective differentiation based on our liking and dislikings. So when we have pliancy, then we can go deep into the practice of mindfulness. So we can abandon the lack of mindfulness by the practice of correct mindfulness. Correct mindfulness means what? We have explained, not like a cat, but with detachment. Samadhi without detachment. So only when you have the correct mindfulness, then you can really hear the Dharma, contemplate Dharma, practice it, and remove obstacles. So it all comes together as a one process. You cannot separate. And it all starts with hearing the Dharma. That's why I have put this verse of the Dhammapada, just like a deep lake with a crystal clear water, so clear becomes. No, sorry, I am in a different place. Okay, it will come later, but it is connected with hearing the Dharma, which is a base. The tendency of mind to think, that is the next thought, is abundant when you have abandoned the lack of mindfulness. Then awareness can be crystallized. When the awareness is there, then when the mind thinks, you will abandon it by will. But the will, of course, cannot come alone. It has to come together with what? With investigation. Investigation of the Dharma, with effort, with joy. These are the factors connected with the wisdom. The tendency of mind to excitement is abandoned by awareness and concentration. But again, concentration will not come alone. Concentration will only come when there is Jing'an, the pliancy, and when there is detachment. So concentration is a main factor, but remember, there is never one factor, always they come together. So will has to do with will to investigate the object, which is wisdom, and the concentration has to do with pliancy, no concentration without pliancy, and with detachment, with sha, which sha, sing sha, not show sha. The tendency to excessive application. Now this word abhoga, anabhoga, Xuanzang translates as yungkung and puyungkung, which is not, which is very free translation. And abhoga, anabhoga is a very important term in yoga also. You will find in the commentaries of yoga very often used also abhoga, anabhoga. In Theravada Buddhism you will find abhujita, which means the way you apply your mind to the object. From the root bhuj, which means to bend in Sanskrit. How you bend the mind to the object. If you bend the mind to the object with too much effort, it will cause excitement, sooner or later. If you bend the mind to the object with too little effort, it will cause sinking of the mind, sooner or later. So in the process of bending mind to the object, as soon as there is attention, you are bending the mind to the object. And as long as you bend, as soon as you bend the mind to the object, there appears the process of differentiation based on mental consciousness. Now, when you have removed, it goes from the gross to the more subtle. When you have removed this subtle tendency of using too much effort in bending the mind to the object, or too little effort in bending the mind to the object, first you have to understand that meditation is always first from the gross to the more subtle. The laziness is the most gross. The lack of mindfulness is the second most gross. The lack of awareness is the third most gross. Then when this gross is not there, then you can apply your attention correctly to remove the tendency to defilement from the mind, which is manifested in meditation either as a thinking mind or the excited mind. When you have abandoned the gross tendency to thinking, and when you have abandoned even the subtle gross tendency, then you come to the most subtle tendency of mind to thinking and grossness, which is manifested as either using too much effort or too little effort in bending the mind to the object, in attention. When that is removed, you have one-pointedness of mind. When you practice continually one-pointedness of mind, you will have samadhi. So this is the sequence. And in order to realize the sequence, you have to absorb gradually the 6 forces. And they also have to be connected with the preceding. Only then you will be able to understand. So first obstacle to remove is laziness. Why we are lazy? Because we don't have wisdom from hearing, and we don't have wisdom from contemplation. So we will see later, we apply forceful attention. So how to remove the forceful attention, which is the cause that we don't find pleasure in meditation, because we use forceful attention. So it is our habit of clinging and aversion, non-equal mind. You have to see it very clearly. So first, through the force of wisdom from hearing and from contemplation, we remove laziness and practice mindfulness. Then, when we practice mindfulness, then the mindfulness will ripen. When the mindfulness will ripen, then the awareness can ripen. When awareness ripens, we can remove defilements. When awareness has not ripened, we cannot remove defilements. Impossible. So in the process of removing the tendencies to defilement, thinking mind, excited mind, bending mind with too much effort or with too little effort, the awareness, force of awareness has to ripen. When the force of awareness is ripened, then the force of equal application to the object can ripen. So we have no more problem of abhoga, anabhoga, yungkung, puyungkung, and we have one-pointedness of mind. So when we have habit of practicing the one-pointedness of mind, the samadhi comes naturally to us. When the samadhi comes naturally to us, we are true yogis. Now, the 4 attentions of bringing the mind to the object, it's called avahana, in Xuanzang translated as yin zhuan. So when we start meditating, when we have no habit of meditation, when we have not meditated before, so what will we do? We will want to grasp the object, because the object is not clear. We have no habit of meditating. The object of meditation is not clear. And whatever is not clear to us, we want to grasp by force. It is always same in daily life, same in meditation. Why we use force? Because we don't see clearly the object, the nature of the object. So that's why the force of wisdom from hearing, force of wisdom from contemplation, remove this tendency of grasping the object by force. We understand very clearly that grasping is the result of what? It's a result of our woman. Because we have woman, very powerful woman, we want to grasp, appropriate, possess for ourselves. So we are suffering. Now the difference between one who practices meditation and one who does not practice meditation, one become aware that this grasping, at least in meditation, leads to suffering. But these habits of grasping will still be there. But in meditation, first we understand in meditation, then we understand in worldly life, because we apply meditation to worldly life. Because the forceful meditation does not work, forceful attention does not work in meditation, it will also not work in daily life. But to understand that it does not work in meditation is much easier. To understand that it does not work in daily life is much more difficult. So the meditation is our teacher for daily life. So as long as we practice forceful attention to the object, it means our mindfulness, correct mindfulness, is not there. Because the correct mindfulness is based on concentration with detachment. That's why we can use wisdom. According to Abhidharma Kosha, the essence of mindfulness is wisdom. The use of mindfulness, ye, nien ye, is concentration. And what is wisdom? Differentiating without attention. Differentiating without force, without clinging, without grasping. And this is especially important for understanding Yogacara. So now we have mindfulness, so we remove the forceful attention to some extent, and we have attention with gaps in application. Attention with gaps in application happens only when we have understood the nature of the object. We will talk about it more. We have understood the nature of the object. We should not grasp it. The grasping is gross. Therefore, we practice attention with gaps in application. Now, when we have attained one-pointedness, then there is attention without gaps. Because our mindfulness, power of mindfulness and power of awareness have ripened. So we got one-pointedness of mind. That is in the 8th stage of, we have talked about the 9 stages, Shinju. So the forceful attention is in first and the second stage, Neiju and Tenju. The 有见作意 is 安住、进住、交付、基金 and 最基金。The 无见作意 is 一进行。And attention with an effortless application, 人因作意 is samadhi, 等持。Now, too many informations may cause mental indigestion, so please think about it, and we will continue the next, that is on Thursday. We will complete this section on the attention and start analyzing the mind process according to the Yogacara. Then if we have still time, we will compare with the Theravada so that you get a better picture. What is the peculiarity of Yogacara? And then you apply it to your understanding of attention, which then will be much more clear when we cope with Vipassana, with the differentiated image. So let us transfer merit for the benefit of all sentient beings. 愿此功德普济一切，我等一众生皆空成佛道。Thank you for your attention. Have a nice evening or sleep and see you on Thursday. Bye bye. So please on Thursday bring your Jiangyi number 5, and I will just add little bit in the Jiangyi 6. No need to add much because there is still much we have to learn. Okay, bye bye.